So we have 2 points on the number plane. This point is the point 1, 2. This is the point 3, 4. And we know that with these ordered pairs that describe the point on the number plane, the first number here, 1, says how far across, and the second number says how far up or down. And this first number 1 is saying that this point is 1 unit across from the y-axis. Or if you start at the origin, you go across 1 and up 2. But this point is 1 unit from the y-axis. And this point here is 3 units across from the y-axis. So what we're talking about today is if there's an interval joining those 2 points, what would be the midpoint of that interval? The midpoint is about there somewhere, halfway along that interval. But how do we find it? Well, it does seem reasonable that if this point is only 1 unit from the y-axis and this point is 3 units from the y-axis, then the point that's horizontally halfway between them would be 2 units from the y-axis. The average distance from the y-axis, the average of 1 and 3. If I average out 1 and 3, I say 1 plus 3 divided by 2, and I get 2. 4 on 2 is 2. And look at that. If you go across 2, that's where that point is. That midpoint of that interval is across 2. But of course, a point has 2 coordinates describing it, an ordered pair. The first number, how far across from the y-axis we are, and the second number, how far up from the x-axis we are. Stands to reason that if this point, second number is 2, it's 2 units up from the x-axis. And if this point's second number is 4, it's 4 units up from the x-axis. So on average, we will be about 3 units up, the average of 2 and 4. If I average out the distance that the different points are from the x-axis, then I'll get 2 plus 4 and divide it by 2, because to average 2 things, you add them up and divide by 2. Okay, so I get 2, 3, because 6 on 2 is 3. So this midpoint here of the interval joining the points 1, 2, and 3, 4 is 2, 3, and we get that by averaging out the x coordinates of the 2 points and averaging out the y coordinates of the 2 points. 1 plus 3 divided by 2, and 2 plus 4 divided by 2, and we get straight to the midpoint there. All right, let's try another example. So I'll just go to this spot on Desmos and remove of those 2 and put 2 more points up for us to look at the midpoint. So now I've just picked 2 points that one of them is in this quadrant, the second quadrant, because you count going around, first, second, third, fourth. So the other is in the fourth quadrant of the number plane. And I'm wanting to find the midpoint of the interval joining those 2 points. The midpoint of this interval here. Now, sometimes people just say find the midpoint of those 2 points. They don't say find the midpoint of the interval of the joining those 2 points, but that's fine. So somewhere down here is the midpoint of this interval, right? Somewhere along there is the midpoint of that interval. But I need to find exactly where it is. Now, of course, I could count along to halfway and do it without any use of numbers, but we're going to need to build this up to be able to do it using formulas and algebra and things like that. So let's try averaging out the x coordinates of each of the points and seeing if that is horizontally the midpoint of the 2 points, and then averaging out the y coordinates of the 2 points. So this is the point -6, 2. So the x coordinate is -6. This is the point 2, -4. So the x coordinate is 2. When you average out two things, you add them up and divide by 2. So if that's the case, -6 plus 2 is -4, divided by 2 is -2. Horizontally, you would think we would land at -2. We'd be 2 units across from the y-axis, but across to the left because it's -2. That's looking reasonable to be 2 units across. The y-coordinates are 2 and -4. So I'm adding 2 plus -4 and then dividing by 2 because there's 2 of them. So that's -2 divided by 2 is -1. So that -2, -1 is the midpoint of the interval joining those 2 points. And I'll just erase this and mark it in more clearly. -2, you go across -2, -1, it's there. It's 2 units to the left of the y-axis and 1 unit down from the x-axis. That's the point -2, -1, and clearly that is the midpoint of those 2 points. That distance is the same as that distance. Now, I do understand someone might say, well, I would have just gone, drawn up a bit of a triangle and said, going across here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 jumps. So that's halfway as going across ways, 2 jumps across. And going up, there's 1, 2, 3 jumps. So I only want to jump 1.5 to be halfway of vertical. And where these two, this and this, join up, well, that there is going to be the midpoint. I like that. That makes total sense. But we need a way we can, without having to draw the points every time, be able to just work it out. So averaging out the x coordinates to find the midpoint's x coordinate, and averaging out the y coordinates to find the midpoint's y coordinate makes sense in that case. All right, let's have a look at another situation. So I'll just go and remove those ones from there. Get rid of those two. And all right. So finally, I have this point -8, -4, and I've been given the midpoint, and I've been asked, sorry, I'll just fix my camera up here. I've got this point -8, -4, and I've been given the midpoint of -2, -1, and I've been asked, where is the other point up here? That's the other end point. That's an end point, and that up here would be an end point, such that we've got a midpoint in the middle. So what if they give you the midpoint and ask you to find one of the endpoints? Of course, you could count your way along. You could say, if you had this drawn up, you could do it diagrammatically by saying, well, straight under here, we have to jump along 1, 2, 3 to get there. So let's jump along another 1, 2, 3, and wherever my answer is, it's somewhere along this line here. And same with vertically, you can come along this way and go, we had to jump up 1.5 to get to there, so we're going to have to jump up twice that. So 1, 2, 3 to get to our new point. So that must have been the other end point. The point 4, 2 must have been the other end point of the interval if that point is the point in the middle. So you could have done it by jumping along, but what about if we want to not have to draw it, or if you want to sort of use a more algebraic kind of approach? What would you do to find the midpoint, which we know is somewhere here? So one way to do it would be to let this point, when we find whatever it is, it's going to be the point, say, x, y. And all we have to do is find out what x and what y are. We'll know where that point is. Now, we know that if you average out the x parts, so the -8 of that end point and the x of that end point, you are going to get the x part of the midpoint. And if you average out the y parts of the end points, -4 and y, you are going to get the y coordinate of the midpoint. So if I just solve each of those, I can figure out what this x is and what this y is. All right, so I'll solve this one over here. I'll double everything. So I've got -8 plus x equals -4. And then I'm going to add 8 onto both sides. So -4 plus 8 is 4. So x is 4. Here I'll solve this here. I'll double everything. -4 plus y equals -2. And I'll plus 4 onto both sides. So y equals 2. So this is the point. X equals 4 and y equals 2. So if this is the midpoint and you're given this end point, then this must be the other end point.